this. This is a terrorist attack.
Erikka Knuti, Senior Director at Purple Strategies, thank you for joining us today.
Oh, good to be here.
This is a very tough story for the country, tough for everyone involved, tough to look at, tough to cover. If there is a ray of hope here, Stuart is talking about whether we are clear and fair and consistent as we deal with these things, and that's clearly an open debate. A ray of hope this afternoon, though, I wonder if you could comment on it from a civic or political perspective, was watching that response on the ground from victims' families, from other people who knew and didn't know those folks, gathering, singing. Erikka, this was a shooter who, from his own remarks, said he wanted to start some kind of, quote, race war. And he has been greeted with a failure of that, a rejection of that in a community that's been torn, of course, by racial divisions in the past, but has come together so strongly and peacefully throughout.
Well, I think if you're looking to start a war, going to people who are in prayer, who are observing moments of peace, may not be the way to do it. I mean, I think there's something about this community that was together when they experienced this tragedy, this group that was that became the victims, but then also broader respect for a church as a place of solace and a place of kind of coming together. I think there's this idea that we would start that he would start this race war kind of starts to touch on some things that maybe a bit uncomfortable for a lot of people. You hear when these tragedies happen, people saying, I don't want to get political about this. But you know what? Like, politics reflects our country, and politics can be a good outlet for our country to solve problems. I wish I was surprised by this shooting, but I'm not. And it's because the last time we had a mass shooting, we did nothing. And we come and we try to support these victims, but we're not supporting them enough to push through some of these uncomfortable conversations about perhaps the Southern strategy that the Republican Party had under Nixon, where they were exploiting some of the local racial tensions, about the the Civil War and supposedly the Confederate flag, which didn't get risen above the Charleston state capitol until 1962, when desegregation and other civil rights issues were front and center. Not digging in and really taking these challenges and tackling them politically is probably one of the biggest problems we have.
You know, as Ari was saying, we watched that scene unfold in the courthouse earlier, and it was very hard to watch, even as it was incredibly beautiful, incredibly powerful. The family members coming out and telling this killer that they forgive him. And the love that was manifest there was like nothing that I've ever seen before. And I think if we could all go forward in that spirit, there would be a lot that could be done. But to your point, Erikka, you mentioned the Confederate flag. You know, that's not central to what we're talking about here, but the very different ways that symbol is viewed, I think, is emblematic of how hard it is to make any progress. Let's take a listen to, just on this channel today, some of the different views that we heard from legislators in South Carolina. First, a state rep, a Democratic state rep that Craig Melvin talked to, and then former Governor Mark Sanford, who talked to Morning Joe.
Well, again, I think it symbolizes hate. Although some would argue that it symbolizes heritage, we've got all kinds of buildings across South Carolina with folk who, during the Civil War and thereafter, will symbolize hate across the state. That's the beginning place. We begin to remove those symbols, begin to teach people how to live together, how to get along. We've got to move the state forward.
Is it time to sort of bury the Confederate flag?
I don't know. I mean, that's opening up Pandora's box. I mean, so what you have with the Confederate flag is a political compromise. And as we both know, with any political compromise, you do not have perfection. Both sides end up a little bit unhappy.
For what it's worth, Josh Earnest, Erikka Knuti said that the Confederate flag belongs in a museum, not hanging at a state house. You know, you look at the Confederate flag, Republicans say that this is about Southern pride. Typically, Democrats say that it's a racist emblem. Black people see it as a racist emblem. White people tend to see it as Southern pride. How do we move forward on these issues when we have such a divergent view of this country and of the world?
Well, the South has a lot of things to be proud of. If they want to celebrate Southern heritage, bake a pecan pie, wear some seersucker. There's lots of ways to do that. But at this point, the Confederate flag is not a symbol of your great, great, great uncle, who, let's say in the best of circumstances, was not fighting the Civil War because of slavery, but was fighting for other reasons. That's not what happened in 1962 when that flag was put back up over the state capitol. To kind of wash it away and say that this is about, a broader heritage. It is not. It is about a heritage of 1962, which is when the civil rights movement was going on. And those issues, I don't think are complex. I think they're actually very settled. If you think that people shouldn't be served at lunch counters because of the color of their skin, maybe it's complex for you. But this country has settled some of these issues, and it needs to be accepted and move forward. And it takes political leaders to sometimes push the country further and forward. I mean, President Johnson, was a Southern white president, and he pushed this country forward on that. So I think this kind of hesitance to look at it because it might make some people upset, or it might mean facing the fact that maybe you've been insensitive your entire life. That might be hard. It's hard to say I'm wrong. Breaking up is hard to do, but I think it's time to break up with the Confederate flag.
And Erikka, just turning back a little bit to President Obama's remarks, we want to play a little bit more of what he had to say in response to this massacre.
At some point, we as a country will have to reckon with the fact that this type of mass violence does not happen in other advanced countries. It doesn't happen in other places with this kind of frequency. And it is in our power to do something about it.
Writing for The New Yorker today, David Remnick said these murders were not random or merely tragic. They were pointedly racist. They were political. Obama made it clear that the cynical actions of so many politicians when it came to their refusal to cross the NRA and enact strict gun laws, their unwillingness to combat racism in any way that puts votes at risk, have bloody consequences. Political ramifications for this event. Can we see a more honest discussion on some of these policy issues?
I hope so. 92% of gun owners support background checks. That's a very simple thing. There was a bill that came to a vote in the Senate in 2013. 54 senators supported stronger gun laws. That's enough to pass. If the rules of the Senate were being used as they were intended, we would have had change after Sandy Hook, but we have had none. So hopefully the fear that the NRA or that gun owners are going to come after you, I'm here to tell you, Republicans, it's okay. It's safe. 92% of Americans don't agree on much. We agree on this.
Erikka Knuti, thank you very much for joining us. And as we mentioned earlier in the hour,